Okay, we'll go ahead and get started. Good morning or good afternoon, everybody. My name is Donna Clements with the Produce Safety Alliance, and I am here to begin today's PSA Educators Call. And I'm very excited to introduce a fantastic lineup of speakers today. Our call today is called the FSMA Produce Safety Rule and Sprout Safety, Industry Impacts and Resource Opportunities. And we're really going to sort of target in on sprout and microgreen specific growing requirements and just hear a little bit from the sprout industry on some of their experiences in complying with the regulations and give you guys the opportunity to ask some questions. I wanted to get started with a couple of ground rules. So just as a reminder, all the participants are going to be muted. We do have some time at the very end today for a panel discussion. So I will encourage you to use the question and answer box throughout the webinar and also at the end, or you can raise your hand if you have a question at the end and I will go ahead and unmute you. There will be time for questions and discussion, as I mentioned. And just a reminder, the session will be recorded and the presentation will be shared via our PSA Educators listserv and on our website after the call. So for anybody who was registered and is on the PSA Educators listserv, you will receive an email probably tomorrow or at the end of the week and with the recording and where you can find it. And we do have a pretty action-packed schedule. So I wanted to jump right into the introduction and the agenda. So the first thing we're going to be doing after introduction is having Carmen Wakeling talk about sprout safety and emerging issues. And then we're going to have Dr. Kaiping Deng talk about produce safety requirements and for sprout growers and available resources. And then at the very end of the call, we're going to wrap up with a panel discussion, bringing in some additional sprout growers to answer any questions. So I wanted to do a couple of brief introductions for our two speakers who are going to be starting the call. First, we have Carmen Wakeling. She is the CEO and co-owner of Eat More Sprouts and Greens Limited. It is a certified organic farm producing a variety of sprouts, greens, and vegetables on 3.75 acres in British Columbia. The sprouts are produced in an indoor growing facility, and they produce about 10,000 pounds of sprouts and greens weekly year-round. In addition to being a grower, Carmen is the president of the International Sprout Growers Association and co-chair of Sprouts Canada, among a number of other roles. And then our second speaker today is going to be Dr. Kaiping Deng. She is the former co-lead and coordinator of the Sprout Safety Alliance, so I believe a number of you probably recognize her name. The Sprout Safety Alliance is a collaboration of Illinois Institute of Technology, FDA, and the sprout industry to develop training on the FSMA produce safety rules, specifically Subpart M. Dr. Deng currently is actually now in a new role with the FDA SIFSAN laboratory proficiency and evaluation team to work on microbial testing method validation. So I think with that, I am going to turn it over to Carmen. However, we actually have a poll to ask you because we are curious, for those of you in attendance, just a little bit of background. So how many of you in attendance, how many sprouts or microgreens growers have you been in contact with? And this will help our speakers kind of get to know you all a little bit better. I'll give you guys about 10 more seconds. Okay, so I'm going to share results and you can see. So it looks like most of you have worked with a couple, so maybe 1 to 2 sprout or microgreen growers. And let's see, about 30% of you more than 5. So we were just really curious of who is in attendance, who's been working with the industry. Okay, and with that, I am going to pass it over to Carmen.
Hello, everybody. Hopefully you can hear me well. I'm in my upstairs with a bit of background noise, so if you need me to speak up, just send me a message. Welcome today. I'm in snowy British Columbia. For once, we're having a snowstorm, and I was on the packing floor this morning because we're short-staffed. I'll top it off, but I'm looking forward to this presentation. So as Donna said, I am the president of the International Sprout Growers Association and have been involved in sprouting for about 30 plus years of my life. Kind of a strange way they got into it, but thank you for having me today. I'm going to get going. This will be a quick presentation. I have 15 minutes and a lot that I want to share with you. So I don't know if you all know about the International Sprout Growers Association, but recently we designed a new website and there's lots of good information there. So feel free to check it out. Our mission, as it says on the slide, is to promote global collaboration among professional sprout growers and suppliers in order to promote the health benefits of sprouts and to work with researchers and government agencies to assure the safe production of sprouted foods. So that says a lot in a few words. A quick list of acronyms. Many of you may know some of these, but I thought I'd share them with you just so that you had them. The sprout industry has its very own acronyms, as do most. Um, and I'm a Canadian sprout producer, so a lot of these terms are not actually language that I speak in Canada as part of our industry, but we definitely, I'm very aware of what's going on. So that's why I'm lucky to have Robin Taylor and Manny Wong joining us later on in the panel discussions because they have the background in the US production of sprouts. All right, so some basic stuff. The ISGA does try really hard to incorporate international audience. A couple of years ago, we had a convention in Australia, which was awesome. We've had conferences in Europe and Puerto Rico, and I'm sure lots of other places as well, Canada. So, oops, we're rolling. Anyways, we don't know about that many other organizations, but there is the European Sprouted Seed Association that works out of Europe. We're rolling too fast here. I'm going backwards. Okay. And Sprouts and Microgreens Canada, which is dominantly right now discussing improvements to the best practices of microgreen production. So, yeah, I'll keep on going. So we've been working with iFish for since iFish's inception, I think, for over 10 years, and we've been really grateful for that work that has happened because it's really helped our industry. So having the collaboration between the research and support at that end and the International Sprout Growers Association has really, we've done a lot of really good things in the last 10 years. For some reason, my slides are just going too fast. Anyways, so in just a bit of an overview, 2020, 2021, which of course has only just begun, we had a pandemic, which was quite a challenge. We have a very engaged board, and we really work hard to outreach with other organizations and growers. Unfortunately, we did have two recalls in 2020, well, 2019, late in the year, and 2020. So they were for E. coli O103, and that's a pathogen that we haven't been testing for historically. So it's an interesting little conundrum we found ourselves in, and we're hoping to move forward. Um, I'm going back. So yeah, just we can talk about all this stuff later on. But E. coli O13 has been our new challenge. I did want to really clear things up about what a microgreen or a sprout is, because I think our industry does have some confusion there. And also consumers have confusion. So it's really important for us to help get this clarity. Uh, a sprout is consumed with its roots attached. They're usually grown in a hydroponic or water system. And a microgreen is consumed with its roots removed. And they're generally grown in substrate. It's important as educators, researchers, etc., that we try and share this knowledge with people because there are quite different challenges associated with both products. So we'll get into that a little bit more later on. Anyways, moving forward. Uh, for some reason, there's a little bit of a cult following around sprouts, and people really do love them. Sprout lovers love sprouts. I love sprouts. They've been a major part of my family's diet for many years. And there's a lot of reasons why I think they're so great. They can be produced year-round locally in any community, anywhere in the world. So they're a controlled environment. Um, we as an industry have come a long way in just educating ourselves and working with others to be better at what we do. So reducing food safety issues. And I don't know. I think any of the sprout producers you're going to talk to today will say the same thing, that sprouts are a really great addition to people's lives. Um, the diverse flavors, etc., are pretty awesome. And if you haven't tried them, please find a reputable grower out there and do try some because you'll be surprised how flavorful they are. And they're also really fun to grow and eat. So on that front, one of the things that we've seen in the last number of years is that through our work with Sprout Safety Alliance and iFish, we're seeing a pretty positive trend in the reduction of sprout recalls and illnesses. So we just put together a couple of tables with this graphing with the data that we could find. And it really shows that through this work, we have been able to make a positive impact on food safety issues with our industry. So I'll move forward. So this was starting in 96. You can see we had some pretty doozy outbreak years in there. If you look at the number over here, 650 cases. Um, and you can see that we have gradually trended downward. The next slide, I'll give you more information on this one. As far as illnesses go, we've actually had a substantial reduction in illnesses over the years, with 2020 being an unfortunate year for us. And that was because of that E. coli 0103. And this is just the same graph in a different structure. So you can see the number of outbreaks and how impactful they were. So 650 illnesses is a lot from 2 outbreaks. So maybe that means we're getting better at controlling it. Maybe we're getting better at traceability. Overall, our industry is definitely working to improve. Um, this is just a little aside that I wanted to share with you guys and girls, everybody out there. I had some personal information or experience with microgreens. In 2017 and 2018, we found Listeria monocytogenes in incoming soil, several batches, and it was quite impactful to our business. We were out of business for 2 months while we were doing the investigation and trying to understand what we were dealing with. Um, we now have a full testing program for all our incoming soil, but I discovered I'm not the only one dealing with this or having had this experience. And so this is actually something I would really love to work with others in different industries on. And I know there's a few other microgreen producers that are really intrigued and want to understand this more. I'm kind of curious if we have an ingredient that might be contaminated or what what we're dealing with. But I wouldn't I would suspect we as a microgreen industry are not the only ones that are going to have impact from this over time. So I just wanted to like flag that as an important potential multi-stakeholder project. So just anyone interested in having more conversation about that, we can maybe touch bases after this or during the question and answers. Um, So I really don't have a lot of time, but we're going to go through quickly what has changed over the years and why we've seen the reduction in our sprout safety issues. And I feel quite confident in saying that that is the situation when we look at the data. So we did a little bit of a table here just to lay out, what we were doing and how those impacts, what we were doing might be impacting our end goal of reducing and improving food safety within the sprout industry. Of course, we began to see issues in 1999, and that was a big blow to all of us. We Anybody that was in the sprouting industry at that time knows what happened. We were mandated in the US to use 20 parts per million chlorine as a seed treatment. And that was because it just didn't know what to do, how to treat this, how to deal with it. So the international sprout growers Association was started, and we were having conventions during that time. So we were able to get together and talk about this stuff, and it was really a scary time. It's overwhelming when you think you're producing a healthy product, and then all of a sudden you realize you're actually potentially making people ill, and that's not the goal of any sprout producer that I know. So you can see that from that point on, we started building out more and more tools. I do want to do a shout out to Bob and Barb Sanderson, who have been just pioneers and diligent hard workers on all of this stuff. And of course, there are many others, but they certainly did a big lift on pulling all this together. So you can see that we implemented the Code of Practice in Canada. The USDA had their guidance on sprout production. And then Donna's in my way, but we moved on forward, and we joined iFish in 2009, and at the same time, as far as I understand, the Sprout Safety Task Force was established. And then in 2012, the Sprout Safety Alliance was established. Since then, we've been developing curriculum, and we actually have, as you can see down here, we have a training that we now do that is mandatory for sprout producers in the US. We have an audit checklist, and so all this has been happening in the last 5 years. And then, of course, we had the implementation of the FSMA, including Subpart M. So we're just continuing to build out best practices, continuing to try and find sprout producers and bring them into the trainings and give them the opportunity to learn how to do this as well as possible. So you all probably see those news reports, and there are still the occasional headline about a sprout, but it's a lot less than it used to be, and it's far more proactive from our side. So this is just the timelines in a different um, graph. So anyway, just tying it all together, just showing that we really have been pretty proactive. So what the data tells us is that we've done pretty well, and we're making good progress. And I think for most industries, I'm sure that nobody is exempt to this. The hardest part is finding the people and getting them involved and engaged. Um, and the important part is for them to understand that when they're making food for people that they want to sell, it's part of the responsibility to take action and be proactive. Um, I would say that spent irrigation testing has made a substantial impact for our industry. So every sprout producer is mandated to test spent irrigation water, and that's usually at a 48-hour point. And the reason for that is that it seems that's the peak for pathogen growth. And anybody using the rotary drums, you can collect a sample from almost every single sprout in that container. So the water runs over it, collect the water, and that's sent to the lab. So that's definitely a best practice that we've been following. And it seems to be working. We have worked with seed suppliers, have been really engaged in this. Seed suppliers as sprout seed suppliers. They are definitely important in the communication strategies because they have access to the database of their customers who sometimes we don't know about. So we're trying to work really hard with everybody in the chain that could potentially help if there's a problem. And they definitely are part of that solution. So it always is collaboration and sharing and trying to support. Okay, what can we learn from this, and how fast can we change things? So as I mentioned earlier, we did have the C. coli 0103, and I would suspect, as most of us know, our industry has been testing for E. coli 0157 on a regular basis. So this was a bit out of the blue. Um, it's a challenge because now we've discovered something new that we need to address, and how do we do that? So what testing methods are there? Because of course testing's expensive, so it's easy to blow a lot of money on testing and not be testing strategically. So how do we work with other industries and regulators, et cetera, to find the best testing program to help support us? Anything that anybody in this room can do would be great. So one of the big asks that we as an industry group have is to try and have more information flowing to us from regulators. And then when there's a situation that arises, we sometimes are the last to know. And it's really helpful if we as experienced growers, many of us having been through recalls, can help talk to the growers, support them. It's quite an emotional time. If any of you have been through recalls, you know what I'm talking about. And just try and mitigate and shorten the time that is required to the impact to a company, the impact to the industry. It's really the more we can do to shorten that, the better. Uh, as with every industry, there's a lot of research needed. And the list that I'm going to show you guys is just the tip of the iceberg because most of the points will then trigger more points as usual. But we really are interested in working with anybody out there who's interested in these topics as well. We'd like to continue to move forward with the work on listeria and other pathogens in growing medium. Uh, we do want to edit or remove the warning labels from sprouts as a category. Many of you probably know those labels that I'm talking about. They've been extremely detrimental to our industry over the years, and we actually feel that we are as safe as any other fresh produce. So it's kind of, they were put there in 1999, both the Canadian government and the US government put them in place, and we do feel that they are a bit unfair at this point. We want to continue to work to improve epidemiological tracking, and I know that the traceability program that you guys are going to be bringing forward in the next few years in the US should help with that, but it's bringing the right partners to the table as well would be really helpful. As I just discussed, testing methods for emerging pathogens such as E. coli O103, and I'm sure there'll be others in the next years ahead. So anything that we can learn from the group or from anyone about that, that would be great. Um, I don't know if anybody knows what competitive exclusion is external to the sprout industry, but we believe that this might be something that could potentially be really beneficial to our products. It's a tricky little beast though, because you've got to get the right strains of bacteria that are living in the sprouts and to put them back to the sprouts and reduce pathogens. And so it's something we're very interested in, and we've dipped our finger in the water with some research around it. But if anybody out there is looking at that as something that might be interesting, we would definitely be really thrilled to participate in any work there. Um, Inevitably, with any industry, innovation and improvement is essential. So we are always working on improving our growing methods, our seed treatments, looking for ways to reduce pathogens, and any innovation in growing equipment. So there's a lot of ideas out there, and it's taking those ideas, making them into something that potentially can be rolled out and tried, and then making a final end result. So anybody interested in that work, please feel free to contact us at the ISGA, and we'll probably be able to put you in touch with somebody else who might be interested in helping, or maybe we'll be able to find somebody within. I know some temperature research was started a while back and looking at whether or not sprouts really were impacted from a food safety perspective by a temperature below 4. And so right at the moment, it seems like there's more to be done there, but there could be some interesting outcomes. And I'm not saying that that's for every product that we fresh produce product, but definitely for sprouts because they are still alive when we harvest them, and they actually do continue to make heat. And some in particularly can get quite hot. Our little beans and things can get really hot. So sometimes reaching those temperature goals are hard, and we wanted to see whether or not it was going to be essential to the food safety of the product. And it's interesting early stage information coming from that. Nutrition research for sprouts is always on the list, and just, are there nutritional benefits to the human microbiome through a diet rich in sprouts? And I think we're hoping to have a presentation from Cian Wang from UBC, who's going to talk on that a little bit in February, I think. So, and then just always education of all of you guys and consumers between the differences of microgreens and sprouts. And that's sort of that. So this is a conundrum, as I said earlier, getting people to participate in the proactive movement. So grower to grower works, but not always. Mentoring works, but the challenges can be around competition or perceived competition and the risk to one's business. Training sessions are awesome, and we've been really lucky to have the ongoing training facilitated through the Sprout Safety Task Force. And Kaiping and Manny have done the majority of that training, and they've done a great job. So some of the issues there are language barriers, time, and finances. Understanding why there's resistance is also helpful, and I think that's something nobody can ever fully understand, but trying to perceive it and stay open to new ideas and thoughts around that is good. As I earlier mentioned, the responsibility associated with food production and understanding that is essential. We really want to build a robust and transparent food safety system, and we feel that we're in a good place to help support that. Of course, we all know that enforcement is not always the right answer, but there comes a place at times. So I am not an advocate of that. I think building strong strong bonds is better, but sometimes somebody just can't figure it out. So that's the way it goes. Um, so to this group, let's just continue to collaborate, and we want to see our sprouts and microgreens be available to people across the planet, because we can make food in uncertain times in uncertain environments that others may have harder time doing. And so thanks for everything today. Those just references, and I guess questions. Maybe Donna, you want to wait till later, or shall we open it up?
Let's, since we have a couple of additional growers who are going to join us at the end, let's hold questions until the panel. So with that, we'll switch it over to Kaiping. Thank you very much, Carmen. That was really fantastic. I enjoyed jotting down some of the at least similarities that I see between the produce industry and the sprouts industry in terms of challenges. So thank you. And while Kaiping sets up her screen, I actually have one additional set of polls for you. So while she gets started, again, we were just very curious about who is in attendance, and we had a couple of additional poll questions for you just to get a better idea of your background. So in case not everybody can see, the first question is, are you familiar with the produce safety rule requirements for sprout growers? So these are going to be specifically subpart M. And Dr. Deng is going to be talking about this in the next section. And then the second is, have you taken the Sprout Safety Alliance training before? And I'll give you a couple more seconds to respond. There's still movement going on. Okay, I'm going to end polling and share results. And it looks like a number of people, excellent, 66% are familiar with the Sprout specific requirements, and 79% have never attended a Sprout Safety Alliance training before. Excellent, well, thank you. And I believe, there you go.
Hi, everyone. I would like to give you a brief overview of the produce rule requirements for sprout growers and available resources that we could use. Since some of you, since some of you may not know the Sprout Safety Alliance history, I'll spend a couple of minutes give you a brief history of the alliance. So back in January 2011, FISMA was signed into law, and SSA was established in 2012 with voluntary participation of the sprout industry, the government agencies, and academia. That's our university, the Illinois Tech. And in January 2013, the proposed produce rule was finalized. So SSA started to develop the curriculum, and the steering committee and different working group were formed at that time. And during the curriculum development, we conducted pilot training sessions in several states to test out several key modules of the curriculum. So in November 2015, the produce rule was finalized. So the SSA curriculum was at the reviews and revising stage at that time. And we finalized the curriculum in August 2016. That's the first version of the SSA curriculum. Then we start the full scale of SSA training. Because sprout grower have a compliance date 1 year earlier than other produce growers. That's January 2017. FDA published a draft sprout guidance in January 2017. So we revised the curriculum to the second editions and finalized in April 2017. And continue to do our training and also start to develop our online course in collaboration with IFPDI, that's the International Food Protection Training Institute. The online curriculum was finalized at the end of 2017, so we start to do a blended course training in February 2018 and continue to do that until last year when the pandemic hit. So we have to convert the second part of the blended course to virtual course. So the first part of the blended course is the online course. That's part one. And the second part is an instructor-led training. It's a one-day training with a group exercise. Okay. So the sprout industry is just a very small portion of the produce industry, but because of a unique risk profile of sprout, the produce rule have a special subpart for sprout operation. That's subpart M. Subpart M covers, it applies to growing, harvesting, packing, and holding sprouts. So unless specific exempt or excluded, sprout operations are under the entire produce rule, including subpart M. So some sprout growers may have misunderstood that they're only under subpart M. So that's not true. So as a like an educator, we try to make sure everybody understand sprout operations are under the entire rule, including subpart M. So here I list the key requirements in the produce rule. So different from other type of produce, a fully enclosed building is required for sprout operation. And also the food contact services for growing and handling sprouts need to be cleaned and sanitized before contact any sprouts and seeds. And sprout growers are required to do environmental sampling and testing for listeria on the growing equipment and environment. And they are required to inspect the seed packages and seeds and beans used for before they are used for sprouting, and they are required for seed treatment and testing then sprout irrigation water. And there are certain record-keeping requirements for sprout operations as well. And there are two required SOP for sprout operations. One is SOP for environmental testing for listeria, and the second required SOP is testing for spent irrigation water. And they are required to test to keep records for seed treatment for every batch seed treatment. So the sprout operation use different type of growing unit. In terms of potential for contamination, FDA consider there are two categories of growing units. One is stationary growing units, as shown here in this slide and the next slide. So this slide is a growing bin for mung bean sprouts. So the stationary growing units are the growing container that does not allow the sprouts to mix during growing. These are the trays in cart for growing green sprouts, for example, broccoli or radish sprouts. This type of growing units produce sprouts that are, they stay, they don't move. So in terms of contamination, they usually, it's localized. Like there are some hotspots in there if contamination occurs. So the sprouts are not very homogeneous, If the contamination occurs, they may stay here. Another category is the mixed category growing unit. For example, here is a rotary drum for growing alfalfa sprouts. And in these growing units, they mix the sprout mix, and it's less homogeneous. And if contamination occurs, very likely they are widespread. So we have to, keep this in mind when we try to sample the irrigation water. So other than growing units, areas where sprouts are grown, are harvested, packed, or held, if there are environmental pathogens occurs, so we need to be aware of. So FDA have a requirement for sprout growers to collect environmental sample and test for listeria. So the rule says each sprout operation must test the growing, harvesting, packing, and holding environment. So this 4 areas for listeria species or L. mono to prevent listeria contamination. So sprout growers are required to develop and implement a environmental monitoring plan for listeria, and they are required to do their sampling during production. And the minimum acceptable frequency for testing, environmental testing, is monthly if the listeria is under control in the production area. If the production is new or small, or they have never tested listeria before, they should test it more frequently until they know there's no listeria in the production area. So we encourage sprout growers to communicate actively with the lab, because the rule require the lab use a specific, the FDA methods to test for listeria for the environmental samples, and same principle applied to spent sprout irrigation water. if the lab does not use the FDA methods listed in subpart N of the produce rule, they should use, they must use a scientifically valid method that equivalent to the FDA methods in accuracy, precision, and sensitivity. Now, so far, there are 3 methods that has been proved for Listeria testing. So another major requirement for sprout growers is seed treatment. So seed treatment requirement, recommendation is not new. Back in 1999, FDA published 2 guidance documents for the sprout industry. One is seed treatment with the calcium hypochlorite, and the other one is testing spent sprout irrigation water. So for seed treatment, sprout growers are required to use a scientifically valid method to do the treatment. And they should use a written seed treatment SOP. This is not required according to the produce rule, but it's highly recommended because the rule requires the growers to monitor the records, keep records for every batch of treatment. So you must have a SOP to do the treatment, right? So the SOP is naturally there. So all, every sprout growers I talk with, if they do the treatment, they always have a written SOP. So the other major requirement is spent irrigation water testing. The growers are required to have a written sampling plan for testing E. coli 0157 and Salmonella. The other non-0157 aspects are not required, but if they want to test it, it's good. It's best practices. And growers are required to collect the sample aseptically for every batch of sprouts. And they're required to hold their products unless the results come back negative. And they're required to do all the record keeping for sampling and testing, including the testing method and testing results. So testing the spent irrigation water is one of the major challenges for sprout growers, financially and technically. So there are different types of growing unit. So it really depends on their food safety knowledge and how they understand the growing unit. So the growers need to know the configuration of the growing unit and know how the water and the sprouts are mixed inside this unit and where the water come out from the unit. Like here in the rotary drum, and this person collect the water from here. So no matter whether there's only single seed type grown in the unit or multiple, as long as in the rotary drum, it's considered one batch. So growers should collect water from this batch. Each rotary drum is one batch. Now, in this example, on the left, the sprouts are growing in tray, and when they water the sprout on the top, water drip down to the lower tray. So the water actually mixed here in the cart. So in this case, you could consider this is a batch. But on the right, there are so many carts in this room. We don't know how big this room is and how long this cart extends. So in this case, we would not consider this as a single batch. So it really depends on how he defined a batch of sprout here when collecting the water. So maybe this part where the water can mix, it's one batch, and the middle one would be another batch, and the one in the back, that's another batch. So I would consider at least 2 batch of sprout here. So to understand the produce safety rule requirement, there are some resources sprout growers or educators can go to. For instance, the SSA training manual, the SSA website, our online course, and FDA guidance documents, and FDA decision trees, and you can go to Technical Assistant Network. The SSA training manual can be free download from the SSA website. So appendix have the acronym and definitions and some sample documents that you can use. On the website, under the resources tab, you could go to, for example, here, all the sample documents you can find here in Word format. So the growers can download from here and then modify it into their version. And also, we frequently receive questions about seed treatment, because some of them, they don't use the calcium chloride method, they use different chemicals or different methods. So they could find some reference here and they can download from the website. And the SSA training course, especially the online course, it's online, and then they can register to take it, and the cost is less than $200. It's a self-taught, self-led course. And then they could take the blended course, part 1 and part 2. And if some growers want to do a 2-day in-person course, so you can contact the SSA, and then we could collaborate. We could do that. FDA also published guidance document, as I mentioned earlier. The one, the draft guidance is very helpful to me. It's very easy to read. It has some draft, the case studies there, and it's much easier to understand compared to the rule itself. And FDA also published a seed guidance for seed growers, seed conditioners, and seed suppliers for the all the recommendations. The seed guidance is relatively short. It's only 9 pages, I believe, 7 or 9 pages. Other than that, there are 2 decision trees from FDA, and one is to help the growers to decide whether the method they use to test for E. coli 157 and Salmonella meets the requirement. And the other one is to help them to decide whether they are microgreen growers or sprout growers. So this is the coverage. And also, if you have questions, technical questions, go to the SSA 10. Regular questions, go to the SSA 10. And here is our website and email. And here I want to, thank PSA and ISGA and FSPCA, especially PSA. I can't thank you enough for all you have done for the SSA. Like when we start to build our educational and outreach working group, Betsy and Gretchen get on the phone with us to share their experience with us. And when we develop our online course, and PSA form a working group to review our slides and give us feedbacks. And at PSA always invited me to join the educator course here, and Don Stoko invited me to join him at the water requirement webinars. And this all help us to increase the SSA visibility and our outreach. And as I said, ISGA has been a long time partner with us, and they are like the Sandersons has been very helpful in our curriculum development, and selflessly share their documents with us to make the SSA templates, the sample documents. And they continue to help us to reach out to sprout growers. And FSPCA also housed at iFish, and we share experience and resources during curriculum development and training. And we partner with ISGA and use the ISGA learning management system to manage the online course and the training certificates. So all this, I'm very grateful for all the partnerships. And thank you all for listening today.
Thank you, Kaiping. I really appreciated that summary of the requirements, and I really enjoyed the photos that you showed because I am not very familiar with sprout production. So I thought that really kind of helped visualize everything. So we have about 10 minutes left of the call, and I wanted to take this opportunity to introduce our two additional kind of experts on the call, Manny Wong and Robin Taylor. Manny and Robin are both sprout growers. Manny is located, his company is called Fully Fresh, and they grow almost 20 varieties of sprouts and shoots. And they're actually one of the largest sprout growers in the southeastern United States. And Robin is located in San Diego, California. He owns and manages Sun-Grown Organics, and they grow sprout, wheatgrass, and microgreens. And they are also both vice presidents of the ISGA. So I wanted to open it up and see if you guys had any questions. And just a reminder, I will look at the attendee list. So if you have any questions, please shoot them in the chat box or the Q&A. Or if you raise your hand, I'll allow you to talk. Okay, so the first question that we received was, I believe, from Kate Allen. How common is growing sprouts on paper towels? And is there a standard microbiological testing program for the use of different medias?
I'll take that, Manny.
Robin, you want to answer that one? I texted earlier, so go for it, Robin, for now, and I'll collaborate a little bit about it. You're on mute.
Unmuted there. I have sprouted on paper towels, but I do not currently sprout on paper towels. I'm sorry, what was the other part of the question?
Just if there was a protocol.
For testing.
Protocol for sprouting on paper towels?
There was the microbiology, Robin.
Yeah.
Micro testing.
Want to take that, Manny? You're more up on
To my knowledge, there is not. It's a standard among whether you use a medium or you use a paper towel or any kind of screening. But paper towels, I haven't seen that very commonly used in the industry as a whole. It's a start. Remember one thing: don't confuse sprouts with microgreen. That's one thing a lot of people is confusing. When I read that, I sort of got in my mind, I think what they're referring to is microgreen more so than our sprouts. Paper towels are used mostly for small growers, home grown kids, and that nature. Okay. All right.
We did have a question. Oh, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
We had a question pop up in the Q&A. Where do growers generally source their seed supplies from? And do most growers use the same sources? Are there a number of different suppliers around the world?
Well, there are in US, there are two major seed suppliers. Both are, one is in Louisville, Kentucky, and the other one is in Cooksville, Tennessee. That's where their headquarters are, but they do have seeds throughout the United States, stores in different DC, different warehouses where it's easily accessible. In Canada, you have Mung Sprouts seeds, which is up in Canada. So among those three, they're probably the majority, I would say about 75–80% of the seed comes from. Or is that true? Do you want to add that?
Yeah, I mean, Manny and I have been around a long time sprouting. So yes, we use those two big ones, but we also source seeds directly from farmers or from different seed houses around the world.
And I was just going to add to what Robin's saying, that it's really important to get a seed supplier that understands the needs of the industry, because we really do have specified needs. It's quite different than growing a field crop. So we need high quality sprouting seed, we need no pathogens, and good shelf life. Those types of things are important to us, but we don't need a beautiful broccoli head, for example. So
Yeah. Especially when we growing sprouts, you need at least a 90% germ. So that's important.
So the companies we work with really understand the needs of the sprouters, and they're able to provide chain of custody, certificate of analysis for us, all that sort of stuff, so that it makes it easier for us to do our job. And they do testing trials in-house. They also understand the need for us to be able to access the same lot of seed that we tried. That's a bit of an ongoing challenge. If you buy seed from just any old person, they might not realize that you need a year's worth of that seed. And once you get a seed that you like, it's a lot of work. It takes about 6 weeks to run a seed trial from start to finish, to test it for microbiology and growing conditions and all that sort of stuff. And so it's not something you want to do frequently.
Yeah, I source a lot of seed from other places that will not provide those kind of guarantees.
Yeah.
So I have an in-house testing system.
Yeah.
We did receive an additional question asking for clarification of the produce safety rules for qualified exemptions for small sprout growers and direct-to-consumer sprout growers. Are they the same as for others produce often consumed raw, or are they tighter? So I'm going to summarize a little bit. I think what this question is asking is in the produce safety rule, not subpart M, but the rule as a whole, there are specific exclusions and exemptions. And I think this person is asking about that qualified exemption, which is for kind of like medium-sized farms, so less than $500,000 total food sales, and to qualified end users. So are those the same for sprouts? I think that's what that question is asking.
I believe that's I'll give it a try, even though this is more a regulatory questions. Yeah, we received this type of question during the training as well. Yes, it is. We need to follow the rule. There's no specific for sprout growers for that, based on the annual produce sales. Yeah.
Thank you. That was my understanding as well. And I'm actually curious. I don't see another question, so I will throw a question in. We have a few minutes left before we wrap things up. I know Carmen mentioned different barriers to educating growers, and language, time, finances. We see a lot of that in the growers we work with as well. Do you find that when you work with smaller sprout operations, are there specific resources that they tend to find helpful, or are there specific requirements that they have more difficulty with? This could be small sprouts or really the industry as a whole.
Annie and Kaiping, you guys are the ones that are involved in the training. I don't know what you're seeing.
Could you repeat the question again?
I was just curious if you were finding differences among some of the smaller sprouters, if there were very specific requirements that they were having trouble complying with, and if there were resources that you give them that were particularly helpful.
The main challenge they could have is testing the spring sprout irrigation water financially. That's a big financial burden for them. Manny, you have something?
Yeah, on the smaller growers that I have talked to and over the years, is that they're still not understanding the actual seed treatment process. Not just about how it's done, but more so on the amount of concentration they're allowed to use, that they should use, the formulation of it is it's also an issue to them. So that's one thing that's going to be an ongoing, I would say, as we move forward. A chart is always helpful. And that's one thing that I've created and I've shared with other growers, and that seems to be a very helpful. Yeah. Yes. Again, Taipei, you're right. You know, testing it's a big factor. It eats into their profit, but it's also they are not understanding what could be pulled as together or not being pulled. They seem to pull samples in terms of cost saving. Yeah.
Excellent.
Yeah, I want to add something. Like since the publication of the FDA guidance in 1999, the large growers, they have started to work on seed treatment and expanded irrigation water testing. But small and new sprout growers, they get a little bit overwhelmed by the produce rule requirement all of a sudden. So when they came to the training, they would ask, "So there are so many requirements for me, and what should I do first?" So in this case, I would suggest them to start with the environmental monitoring first. Just make sure your environment is clean, and then slowly to pick up all the other requirements. They have to do it step by step. Not they cannot implement everything at one time, but they try to. They do.
We see that a lot as well.
Yeah.
I was just going to add that one of the things is for some of us, all the growers on this call, we've been involved in for a long time. So it's been small incremental changes. Whereas when you're starting out right out of the gates, it's a big lift. It's a lot of work. There's a lot of standard operating procedures in place and training. I have carts and carts of things that we have to deal with. So I'm sure Robin and Manny are in the same position. So it's just a lot to manage it.
Excellent. Thank you. So I think,
Hard to do on your own.
sorry.
It's hard to do on your own. You need to delegate.
Absolutely. So as we wrap things up, because we are a few minutes after the hour, there was a question in the Q&A referring to, I think, something that Mandy had mentioned, having a chart of the seed treatment, the concentrations. Is that something that's publicly available? I wasn't sure if that was a resource that exists. There was somebody that had a question if that was available to share with others.
I can make it available. It's not that question. It's just the concentration. I certainly put it together. That's not a problem. I can share that with you, with the group. Yeah.
It seemed like there was a little bit of interest, but
That'd be not a problem.
excellent.
Donna, there was a related question about soybean. One of the participants asked that soybean was vulnerable, that yield off soybean is less for a chlorine treatment. And they were asking if there were alternatives to a chlorine treatment for some seeds, or is it required that it be soybean all the time?
Thank you, Donna.
Chlorine all the time, my bad.
It's Carmen here. I'm a Canadian and an organic grower, and so we have done quite a bit of work with alternative seed treatments in Canada. We did an Organic Science Clusters 2 project and did seed treatment trials with hydrogen peroxide and vinegar and hot water, and that's available in different locations, and I'm sure we can get that sourced to you. But I'm not sure, because I'm Canadian, I'm not sure what Manny and Robin would respond to that question, but there are alternatives. Hot water seems to be a good one.
Okay.
So
Thank you.
Hot water doesn't work well with soybean.
yeah.
It's just a matter of well, doing something's better than doing nothing. I look at it that way. And I've experimented by reducing this actual treatment time. Does help. So.
Okay. Thank you.
It is an area that we are continuing to always try and learn more. And that was one of the competitive exclusion points there, is that maybe that's an alternative eventually. But we're actually, as the ISGA, we're working to pool those resources a bit more available for people, because they're a little hard to find sometimes. And the US used the 20,000 parts per million chlorine for so long that there's less available information, I think, than there could be.
Mhm.
I think it's one of the biggest issues with the new rules is the seed sanitation, and they want a scientific background to back it up.
Mhm.
And there's a lot on the calcium hypochlorite, but there's not a lot on anything else. So it makes it difficult, especially in the US with if you're going to supply a big company with sprouts and they're going to put your system through their food safety, all their experts are going to look at everything that you're doing, and they basically only know about the calcium hypochlorite, and that's what they want you to use, even though it says you can use something else. So I think it's a challenge that needs to be met in the US. Because it'd be nice to get rid of the calcium hypochlorite.
Interesting. I can tell you from what I've heard, it sounds like calcium, some of the hypochlorites are by far the most popular that I've heard discussed in terms of seed treatment.
It was pretty much the only one available for a long time for US growers. So that's kind of the reason.
Okay. Thank you. So because we are a little after the hour, I did want to share a couple of PSA updates. However, I will have Don keep an eye on the chat box and Q&A if there are any last minute questions. But while we wait for any last questions to come in, I want to just share a quick update on upcoming PSA remote Train the Trainer courses. These are all currently listed on our website under that hyperlink. We do have a Train the Trainer next week. That is going to be our last pilot. So we have, with moving Train the Trainer courses to a remote offering, we have been adapting the agenda a little bit, adding in additional breakout sessions, just some more use of breakout rooms and discussion that we normally did not have in a normal Train the Trainer course. So we're hoping this is the last pilot. And then we also have 3 additional offerings coming up in March, April, and June, and we're sort of seeing where the interest lies there. If you are interested in a specific course, if you go to that hyperlink, you can type in your information, I think it's your email, and you can sign up to be notified when registration goes live. So we are expecting registration to go live for those Train the Trainer courses once this last pilot occurs. So we're still keeping a close eye on evaluations. The other update I wanted to share was the next PSA educators group. This is going to be Monday, February 22nd, 2 p.m. Eastern. So really the same time slot as what we're doing today. And Dr. Connie Fisk, our Northwest Regional Extension Associate, is going to be presenting remote training delivery tips. And this is actually very similar to a presentation that we have added into the remote Train the Trainer courses. So it's been very popular amongst the participants. So we thought that we should offer it as an educators group to the larger group of collaborators. And with that, I did want to stop and see if there were any additional questions. And so I'll take a moment and stop. See if anything.
Nothing else came into the chat while you were speaking.
Okay. Well, I wanted to take a moment and thank you for all of our presenters and panelists. It was really a treat to learn a lot more about the sprout industry and some of the food safety sprout specific requirements. So thank you guys very much for joining us today. And as usual, we will post the recording up on our website. And for any of you on the trainer listserv, the PSA educators call listserv, you will receive the link to the recording and some of those additional resources that we shared in the chat box today. I'll share with you. Excellent. Well, thank you very much. I appreciate it. And with that, I think you guys are free to go.